This episode of RSR is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, Grace Design, and Picker. These are tools that I use every day in my studio, from the Spectra 1964 STX 600 and Native Instruments Complete 15 to Isotope Ozone and RX, Atom Audio monitoring and headphones, and the central hub for my studio, the Grace Design M701 audio interface. Check out my studio profile on the Picker app on iPhone or Android and follow the sponsor links in the show notes. Grab my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and remember to like this video and subscribe on YouTube because it's a great way to help support this show. Now, get ready to rock.
Today, you can run a mic cable out there, but Dante interfaces allow you to run hundreds of feet on a single piece of Ethernet cable and sound amazing. The Focusrite preamps that they make in their Dante devices are descendants of the ISA. So there's a number of different Dante devices that you can get that are semi-affordable that allow you to move audio just anywhere in your house or anywhere in your recording environment on a piece of Ethernet cable. And I still think here, 10, 12 years on, people have a hard time getting their head around the fact that you get 96 channels at 96K uncompressed on a single piece of Ethernet cable.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Rockstars, if you want fresh song ideas, Complete 15 from Native Instruments has the tools to kickstart your creativity. With Contact 8's Chords tool, you can generate and customize chord progressions instantly for songwriting. And the Phrases tool gives you ready-to-go melodic inspiration right at your fingertips. With 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds, Complete 15 helps you turn blank pages into music. Pair that with a complete control keyboard or machine hardware for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Phil Wagner, a respected leader in the pro audio world who began his career in live production in the Catskills and later as a recording engineer at Soundworks, New York City. Phil went on to lead U.S. divisions for companies like Soundcraft, Rupert Neve Inc., and Trident Audio, and spent 22 years with Solid State Logic, rising to president under Peter Gabriel's ownership. He also served as CEO of Focusrite Novation, where he helped pioneer RedNet Dante audio over IP technology, and has worked with Oceanway Audio and Apogee Electronics. Phil has visited major studios from London to Maui and contributed to Dolby Atmos and the Recording Academy's efforts in high-resolution audio. And a big thank you to Fady Hayek at SSL for making our initial introduction. Thanks, Fady. Please welcome Phil Wagner to Recording Studio Rockstars. Phil, my friend, are you ready to rock, man?
Good morning. Yes, we are. Thank you, Lidge. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
It's great to have you here, dude. I was saying before we did this that, I've been in audio for a while and you see people around. I've met you. You've come to my studio. I've met you at various events. But I think of you as, a mentor, elder statesman to somebody like me. So it's really nice to finally meet you and get a chance to find out more about who you are and what you've done. So I'm glad you're here on the show, man.
It's been 20 years since we first met, actually.
Has it really? Do you remember where it was when we first?
It was the Haystack at Bonnaroo, I think, one of the first few years. And that's when Fady and I put together the AWS 900 for that setup.
That was so much fun, man. It was such a blast to have the AWS consoles down there. I know you guys jumped, I mean, we all jumped through some serious or jumped over some serious hurdles to pull it off because it's no easy feat to ship a console across the country to arrive in the middle of a farm field for a festival.
Well, it was worth it, I think.
Yeah. Um, and it sounded so good. That was, that board in particular was one that, I think it was new design for you guys at that point, but you could just plug a 3-prong outlet into the back of the thing and it was whisper quiet, the power supply, no fans or anything like that. It was just plug it in and go. It was great. But welcome to the show, Phil. Can you give us
Thank
a
you.
little bit of I read your intro, but there's so much to say, and I wondered if you'd like to give us sort of a brief overview of your story arc of getting interested in music and being in Soundworks in New York to where you are today.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, it's been one long, strange trip, you might say. I had a love of music since I was a kid, and I played trumpet and band. And then I decided, I got into a big resort hotel in the 70s and got a chance to work with greats like Bobby Vinton, Shirley Bassey, Dionne Warwick, and a lot of great talent from way back. It was Vegas and there was Catskills. So that was all that was happening in a major way. But it got me a chance to see, sort of major talent working with major productions, and it was really great. I did sound, I did lights. And then I decided by the time, I ended high school, I got to do something with my life. And I didn't want to be a doctor, didn't want to be a lawyer, wanted to pursue my passion for music. And what they say, if you like what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, it's kind of true. So I said, I'll go to NYU in the music business and technology program. And that led to working at Soundworks, where I had a chance to work with Steely Dan and Chaka Khan and Joe Cocker and a number of others. We put in a very early SSL. That was 42 years ago, about the 10th console in the US. And that was great. And that experience, and I would say as advice, go for if you want, it's harder today to work in a commercial recording studio, but if you're going to work in one, work in the best one. And, you have to work hard, have to be enthusiastic. And I did a couple years in the studio before I realized that I wanted to go home at 5:00, which isn't really suitable for a studio. It's which 5 a.m., which 5:00, 5 p.m. or 5 a.m.
Right.
So
Right.
that's when I met Phil Dutteridge from Soundcraft and Betty Bennett, who was at Soundcraft at the time. But going back to the studio, I had a chance to work with the late, great Roger Nichols, and Roger had done all the Steely Dan records, and to work with these guys was really an experience and quality and really focusing on the excellence of audio, and that's been a big theme of mine throughout my entire career, and carries me through to this day, is a passion for great audio, not just making
Yeah.
sounds, and I think we all really need to get back a little bit more towards high-quality audio as a general theme. So then,
So you had a lot of experience, behind the board and capturing those sounds. And
Sure.
then, at some point you switched to, helping to provide those kind of sounds for studios everywhere through all the different companies you've worked with.
Yeah, I think it was a decision to, stay in the creative side. Or, I wanted to be a recording engineer producer, but I really liked the stability of pro audio. So that was the decision I made, which was to be behind the scenes one notch and work with every recording engineer producer. And
Right.
not everyone, but a lot of them. And that's what I've accomplished in my career. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, in a way, you started to make a whole lot more records,
Yeah,
by
exactly. And when you can
being able to
impact
help so many.
Exactly. Look at when we made the transition at SSL from the 4000 to the 9000, and that was a huge impact on the quality of the records. There's certain things you can point to and say, yeah, that change within the industry and the wholesale basis really has made, sonic difference. There's been developments in Pro Tools over the years that have made a significant sonic difference, and these things along the way. So when you're helping that on a large scale worldwide basis, it's very gratifying.
Yeah, what Is it fair to ask you to describe, what are the top 3 things about going from the 4,000 to the 9,000 that you think of when you think of that difference?
Yeah, well, the 4000, the SSL SL4000 has made strides between the E series, which I first put in, and then G series, where they just went through the signal path, and a lot of that was defined by how big were the consoles. When the consoles got to 64 and 72 and 80 channels, you had to re-engineer it, and in doing so, it made them sound better. But there's only far that that technology with the chips and that they had at the time, and the way the console was engineered, that it could make improvements. So the BBC invested with SSL to develop the platform known as the 9000, and they went through the entire signal path. And the entire signal path was redesigned for what's known as super analog. And super analog is embodied in the 9000 and everything after that, the AWS 900, the duality, um, even all the outboard gear that SSL makes today. The origin was a little bit of a throwback to the original 4000, where it was not entirely super analog and meant to really emulate and recreate the sonic excellence of the original 4000. They're different products, and people love the origin.
Yeah, well, is there a way for you like, if somebody hears the word super analog, I mean, we don't have to get too into the weeds, but how should we think about that? I mean, do we think about it as just a cool name for something that's better, or is it sort of a concept about how the sound is done?
I like to say it's 6 foot deeper and 10 foot wider. And there was a particular Whitney Houston record at the record plant where they had a 4000 in one room and a 9000 in the other room. And I could play you the CD today. And instantly, when you hear the 9000 in the first couple beats, first bar, you hear exactly that sonic footprint. And when SSL puts that same super analog technology into the live console, and those mic preamps emulate that exact wider, deeper sound quality improvement. And it's all to do with how the circuitry is designed without capacitors in the signal path, no coupling capacitors, and it just produces a result that is hard to beat.
Yeah, well, to your point, console design is a lot. Designing one mic preamp, there might be some fundamental things you learn about signal path and purity, and then there's other things like um, elements like transformers and how they can affect the sound and harmonics. But once you go into the console design, it's like this whole nother level of getting all that stuff to work together and then really retaining, holding on to the quality of the sound as it passes through the console, right?
Yeah, they're certainly, getting it to work at all. These are very
Yeah.
intricate systems, and studio consoles are fairly sophisticated, but they have to be set up right. They're customized and they're environmentally sensitive, and it's a real job to get it operational within the studio environment, and then to get the engineers to be happy with it. But the large consoles were done in a time when we didn't have Pro Tools. We had, tracks, and we had to go out, 80 tracks wide just to do what you can do with a computer these days.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's see. Let me zip back a little bit and ask you a couple of questions too. So, for example, starting out in the Catskills, um, I got a couple of photos, and I wanted to share this too, because I believe this is. Let me get that. Let me get that going there. I believe this is the. Is this the hotel right here? Because it's got such a great look to it. Hang tight. Let me know if you see this right there. Is that bringing it up
Yeah, I think that's
for
the
you?
Concord Hotel. That's part of it. That was one of 4 towers. Uh, and
Okay.
it was a great experience working in that environment. I was setting up 9 bands a day. It's funny, we had the Shure SM545, which was the predecessor to the SM57, and it didn't even have an XLR connector on it. It had not a bayonet mount, but a plug-in when you screwed it around, and the screw would always get, the thread would always get screwed up, and we had Shure Vocal Masters. So going back to the 70s, we had sort of early audio, but it was a lot of fun.
Sorry,
It
I
was a
seem to have
great
pulled up some
experience.
window there. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I also love seeing all the old cars in the parking lot. It just
Sure.
reminds me of
Yeah. Well,
that
well,
time.
the showroom and the Imperial Room would seat for drinks 2,000 people, made it the second largest nightclub next to the original MGM Grand in Vegas. So that was pretty spectacular to get a start. And we had Altec 604 speakers, a couple of those stacked, and that was it. And a great room with theater drapes that just sounded amazing. You put 30-piece orchestra in there, and you get a legitimate talent, and it just was the most amazing experience. When I started out when I was like 13, I was working a 6-foot carbon arc Super Trooper spotlight, which was amazing in and of itself. You just, you're a little kid and you got this, 1,000-pound spotlight that you're throwing around a room with people like the Beach Boys and everyone else. And it was just amazing to do lighting as well as sound. My
That's
first
pretty
gig
cool
I'll
to hear
never
you say
forget.
that. So I was going to say my first job at 18 years old was becoming a movie projector, and same thing. We had to operate the old, I think they were Century carbon arc projectors. So I know
Yeah, you have these
exactly what you're talking about when it comes
two
to.
rods, and you had to keep them lined up or the light would go out. And I saw one up in Seattle a couple of years ago, and I was shocked just to be around it. But it was a lot of fun. And I'll never forget the first job I ever had on stage I was like, I can't even remember, 12, 13, and I was sitting behind the 604 Altex, and Helen Reddy was on stage, and I was paging her out her microphone cable, and as she'd come stage right, I would pull it back in, and she'd go stage left, and I'd wheel it back out, and that was, it was great. Good start.
Wow, don't go the wrong direction. Don't get distracted and
Exactly.
yank her over.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then, and then tell us about Soundworks. I mean, because I don't really know anything about that time and that studio. So I'd love to hear you describe what that was like a little bit, if you'd like to.
Well, it was a studio that was partially owned by Gary Katz and of Steely Dan fame for a while, and Charlie Benanti started it. It was in the basement of Studio 54 on 54th Street, right across street from Hit Factory, and it was a place where Steely Dan had done parts of Asia, parts of Gaucho, a lot of Nightfly, and these two projects after Nightfly, which are called Eye to Eye, which are amazing. And there's Roger Nichols, and it looks like Charlie Benanti in the background there. Yeah, so we had a Harrison.
Room would this have been right here?
That looks like Soundworks, and I think that's the Harrison. That was a 3232, which was there when I got there, and that was probably during Gaucho or Nightfly. That's great you pulled that up. And we had the 3M 32-track digital machine, which I'm just reading the Record Plant book, Buzz Me In, which is an amazing read. I've read about 30 or so music industry books in the last couple of years, and I just finished the Buzz Me In. And as things started to go digital, 3M was the first machine. So Steely Dan, really being perfectionists, started using the 3M 32-track machine, and there were a couple studios in LA that had it, Westlake and Record Plant and the Village, and we got, we were using that machine. It was pain, but it sounded amazing. It ran at 50 IPS with a 1-inch 32-track tape. And
wow, 32 on 1-inch.
Yeah, and when I first started working at Soundworks, we had converted around 1984 all the Steely Dan masters to CD. CD was just coming out. I had a chance to work directly with Roger and getting the editing on the DAE 1100, putting the PQ code stuff on there and transferring from the 3M M81 4-track machine, all of the Steely Dan masters, and that was a lot of fun. So, a solid helping of Steely Dan there all the time, and Chaka Khan, like I said, and Joe Cocker bunch. I was doing jingles and records during the day and remixes at night. It was a full 20-hour day, and it was really exhausting.
Rock stars, if you want your mixes and masters to translate everywhere, iZotope Ozone 12 gives you the tools to finish with confidence. The new bass control helps you see and balance your low end and punch. Unlimiter brings back life to overcompressed tracks, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, or bass using only the stereo mix file. And when it's time to get loud, Ozone's new IRC Maximizer gives powerful, clean masters without distortion. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. What was Shaka Khan's hit? Shaka Khan, will you rock me, Shaka Khan? That's what I remember from high school.
Yeah, that was done. Yeah, that was done up at Atlantic. We did Through the Fire with I think it was Elliot Shiner and Russ Titleman,
Oh, cool.
and it was great. It wasn't a couple sessions with Chaka doing vocals, but it was just amazing. We were very busy, and having one of the first SSLs, we thought we were going to go into video, and that's why we had a 6000, and a couple studios like A&M and others, majored on the 6000, and it was a good time. But this was before SSL became very popular, and that quickly changed by 86 or so.
Yeah, yeah. So this was really your introduction to the SSL too, and you became really familiar with it and got to know it through the.
I put it in and installed it, and installed Total Recall on the console when it first came out, and it was really going back to the beginning, and made a lot of friends back then, and stayed with it.
Wow. Now I think one of the first experiences we had an SSL at my school, and so I got to play on it a little bit, but really it wasn't until we went to go mix with Tom Lord Alge, and I really saw somebody use the SSL and really work with it, and that was my first introduction. And one of the things that really struck me was he'd be messing with something, and then he'd say, "Oh, hold on, that's not quite right." Next thing you know, he's taking the console apart right there. He's like pulling channels out and pulling the fader out, adjusting, or he has his other one he wants to try, and I was like, wow, it's amazing. Somebody gets so familiar with it, they can, just lift the hood right up and make an adjustment that they prefer and, close it down. And I imagine you probably got that familiar with it.
Yeah, I did. I'm not a technician, but Tom certainly gets into it. I mean, if you look at this one strip of 54th Street in the 50s in Midtown Manhattan, you had Power Station on 10th Avenue where Clear Mountain started, and then I was on 8th Avenue, and then 2 blocks over you had Chris and Tom starting at Unique on 7th Avenue. We all sort of came up during the same period. I decided to go in a different direction, but I still maintain these friendships. I assisted Bob. I've known Chris and Tom forever, and one of the greatest points of pride for me is to work with these icons that I've known for 40 years and to stay in touch with them, and I still am very close with all these folks.
Yeah. Yeah, I see you guys at events. You shared a lot of photos with us too. So Rockstars, we may look at some of them now, but definitely we'll have a link. I think that's a shareable link to the Facebook stuff you sent, Phil, but we can include that in the show notes. So if you want to go see a lot of cool photos of Phil and all these studios he's interacted with, I highly recommend it. All right, cool. So let's see. It's cool to hear the stories of that time and, the whole row of studios. So did you feel like there was sort of a community to making records that you guys got to interact and everything like that?
Yeah, and then there was this organization, which isn't really as popular now, but it was called SPARS, the Society of Professional Audio Recording Studios, and they would have lunches in New York every month. So I got to know all the studio owners through that, and then making presentations. And I took a sidetrack out of the studio, worked for Neve for 4 years when we introduced the V and the VR. And, you just work with all the studio owners and you become known in the community. And it was great to go from new kid to old guy over many years. But there was definitely a sense of society and camaraderie between all the studios, because they need to know things like, well, how much do we charge for the food? How much do you surcharge you put on food. I mean, you have artists coming in the studio and you got a lot of food being ordered and all these little things. How much you charge for machine rentals and how much you charge for Pro Tools rentals. So all the studios would, dare I say, conspire to figure out the best methods. And it was a great period of time because you had all the studio owners would converge in a room once a month and talk about these things. And it was a great, great time in studios in New York in the 80s. There's so many
it's
great studios.
It's the same thing as musicians getting together and saying, what's the best tuner to use,
Exactly, yeah.
Basic stuff that helps.
And LA, because of the proximity, we really could never have spars be as prominent, but we tried, and there was a lot of camaraderie in the LA studios, which I've spent my 3 decades involved with. So I moved from New York to LA in about 1991.
So when you were in LA, tell us about your LA time.
Well, let's see. I always wanted to be in LA. Somehow I came out because Soundcraft was based in LA, so I'd visit there. With Neve, I'd get back and forth a bit. And then with SSL, they need someone to run the LA office, so I did, and that was around 92. I first came out with Trident. I took a break. I didn't feel I could go from Neve to SSL, just out of the frying pan into the fire. So I took a little break, met my wife, bought a house, came out here, and then the SSL opportunity opened up, and that was about 92. And again, you'd redo it all over. You bring all the community together, you get new technology, introduce it to people, and before you know it, we had 35 9000 series consoles in studios in LA, and most of them are still there. Many of them are still there. I mean, the studio scene's changed a lot, of course, but I think the fundamentals of recording have not.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. And so part of that question for me is, do you still play trumpet? Did you sort of hold on to some of the stuff, your interest in music, and how does that tie into, because you've gotten involved in the world of manufacturing and providing consoles for people in studios all over the place. But I imagine there's a balance, like you said, of your love, your passion for high quality sound and just your love for music and how all that converges so that you just keep that love for it all the way through.
Sure. I don't play anymore. I'm trying to pick up a bass. I have a P bass that I want to spend time with, which hopefully in my retirement I'll get a chance to do. But I really channel my energy through the projects. Like I got involved with film dubbing. I always had a love for the Hollywood sound on film. So I was fortunate enough to be able to design some film consoles for a studio in New York, originally Sound One, who did a lot of the walkie-talkies, as they're known, the New York directors. And then when I came to LA, I started working with the film studios like Warner Brothers and a variety of others, and ended up building a bunch of film consoles, which is a lot of fun, and then got into scoring consoles. So when we came out with the 9000, we put together a half a dozen 96-channel scoring consoles, which the mic pre sounded so good, and the composers noticed it, that we had a very good run with that. And that was really, I channeled my musical energy through studios and projects and working with great engineer producers like Bruce Ledeen and getting him onto the 9000, stuff like that. Yeah. So it was really, my musical energy was channeled through others, let's say.
And then you had a chance to, you weren't with Harrison at any point like that, because I know he was on a 32 at some point as well.
We started Soundworks with the Harrison, then we quickly changed that out for the SSL. And then as a complete 360, when SSL bought Harrison a couple years ago, I had a chance to revisit that, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And then, and I don't think I've asked you, just to give you a chance to tell us, what are you doing now? So I don't know if we actually covered, what your role is now and what your day-to-day is.
After 40 plus years, I decided to give it a break, and I'm taking it easy now. I'm consulting with a few companies, getting into some loudspeaker technology and things like that, but I'm mostly out of it. I think what it did give me a chance when Clear Mountain, his house burned up in a fire, unfortunately, and I managed to help him out with Chris and Tom Lord Alge and get him the exact console that he had rebuilt again with your and my friend John. And the thing is that I'm glad that I had the time to do that, and now I'm glad I have time really to myself, but, I'm semi-retired to fully retired. It's been a year now
Right
since I
on.
left.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because that was such a tragedy that Bob that they lost their home there and the studio, the home studio. So that was Mix This. That's the studio name
Yeah.
for the studio, and it was
Now
right there. The pool was right outside the door.
yeah,
I didn't get
exactly.
to visit it, but I just heard stories about it.
Yeah, so we built a console for Bob, in 1994, and he wanted a G series, so we did a G plus for him. It was a 72-channel console, and it had special, options where you could take one of the limitations of 4000, it only had 4 aux ends in a stereo. So one of the modifications that were done, and SSLs were highly customizable on the 4000, was we took the front back panner and broke it out so you could address the 8 routing buses. So you had 24 multi-track buses, and then 8 of the 32 were set up for ABCD stereo, which became a standard feature on the 9000. But Bob's console had been modified for that, and he used that for surround mixes, which he did simultaneous to the stereo. And it was built a certain way and was customized a certain way. And then when the fire happened, we both, Chris and myself, we were calling Bob, and I was calling Betty saying, we just want to help. So Chris wouldn't loan give Bob his console. Tom had a console that was virtually identical to the main modification, this Bluestone modification with the Q
Wow.
stereo. And so we put that together, and John Edwards, had it and for a couple months and just made it happen. And so now Bob's very happy. But the amazing thing, he's got literally the identical console, the identical SSL, channel-wise, layout-wise, functionally that he had originally. And it's a really amazing thing. It's called Mix This from the Ashes, and he's very happy to be back in the swing of things. And people like Bob and Chris and Tom, they're never going to go away from the 4000 because it's such a productive tool for them. It's the man-machine interface. It's like, your favorite guitar.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was trying to see if I had a photo of that. I'm not seeing. Oh, here we go. Let me see if I can pull this one up. I believe this should be it right here.
So that was a labor.
I try.
That was a labor
I
of love
try to have
lasting a couple
buttons for
months.
instant sharing. Yeah, there we go. Is this what we're talking about, right?
I can't see
Mix
the
this.
full. It looks like the
Sort
original
of like a
studio.
360
Yeah, that's
photo of
the
the
original
studio.
studio. Yeah, and that's not the new one. Mixes from the Ashes
Right.
is the
Okay.
newer one. But the key is
I
that
don't know
he's
if I
got
can find
the
it that quick.
the identical acts that he always wanted. Well, he wanted after the fire. And when I called him a couple days, I said, afterwards, I said, well, I just need to know what I can do and how quickly I can get to it. And he just said, I just want to get back to work. So we put that together. And a couple months later, he goes, when will it be ready? I said, well, it'll be ready the day after the studio's ready. And it was.
Wow,
So,
amazing, man.
yeah, John spent 2 months refurbing it and getting it technically tied up. And we brought back Lucas Vandermee, who was the ex-Apogee engineer, to do the finite elements of the bus compressor, because Bob's got it set up for Atmos, and you can modify 4000 that if you have enough patchable fader racks, which is a obscure piece of technology, which is standard, and you couple them, you end up with 16 channels that can be tied to the main bus compressor on a 4000. So you can actually do
Wow.
surround on a console designed 40 years ago.
Now, what does that mean? 16 buses that are tied to the main channel. How does
Yeah,
that?
so
How do you explain that to us?
the 4000 was set up for quad, left front, right front, left back, right back. And then the bus compressor is 4 channels. But on the later 4000s, there were 4 patchable faders, which would give you 8 channels per fader. They were wild faders. And that's based on VCAs. So you tie the VCA control to the bus compressor. So as you fade, the level of compression applies to not only the quad compressor, but the 4 patchables. Well, if you have a second patchable fader rack, now you have 8 stereo faders. So that's 8 plus, that's 16 channels right there. So you fade the master bus compressor, say in a show with video, you're fading to black. You need to be able to do that.
Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848.
But you also may not want a low frequency effect triggering the compressor. You may not want the surrounds to be compressed by the lead vocals. So we had to dial in, and Lucas designed this, the ability to have the sidechain contribute or not to the main bus compressor, and the effect of the compressor affect which signals. So there's a whole set of options that get programmed in to allow the console to work the way that Bob wants it to, with a variable contribution on certain signals. So it's pretty.
So in other
the
words,
level of modifications.
If we have multiple channels in an immersive mix, we don't necessarily want all channels to have equal impact on the compression. The mix compression, is that a way to think of it?
You want to be able to have control over what's triggering the threshold and what signals are being affected by the overall compression. So it's again a sophisticated setup for those who've worked a certain way for a number of years. And things like bus compression, master bus compression, Atmos is a thing now. And I guess if you can do it in the box, great. But not everyone wants to work in the box.
That's cool, man. Well, for those of us who are working in the box, you guys have also made some incredible tools, the UC1 and the UF8, and I've been using those now for years, since you helped me get those in my studio, and I just love it. I mean, everything from the fact that it's really nice to look at your studio and think, well, that looks nice. It actually looks like a beautiful console sitting there, to just the way it flows and the ease of use. The functionality of the UC1 is so great. Would you like to just give a brief overview as to what that is, or what that thinking was for the rock stars listening?
And let's back up a minute. When I left SSL, it was like, there was enough studios and we had a recession. So I went to work with Focusrite and starting up Focusrite Innovation Inc., which was great, and getting into, whole level of different realities post Napster for people who make music at home and needed a solid interface. And when I came back to SSL in 2019, it was with the exact idea that Audiotonics, who then owned the company, was going to go into a line of interfaces and a line of controllers, and the unbeknownst to me, Origin, which we launched at AES in 2019, was a great surprise. But we really wanted to make the SSL technology through plugins and controllers and outboard gear more accessible, that sonic quality and that ergonomics, which goes back to the design of the original 4000, the man-machine interface, being very strong. And when you look at the controllers, the UF8, the UC1, and the UF1, they're very powerful, intuitive to touch, and they work. There's certain aspects of it, like the way that the controls are spaced and organized on the UF1, for example. The transport control harks back to the beginning of the company. Everything that SSL makes has a certain DNA inside of it, whether it's the way the EQs are geared or the way that they respond, the way that they sound. It's all tied to an original DNA of SSL, the je ne sais quoi, I like to say. And wherever you have a chance to operate an EQ that says SSL, it's got to be geared precisely. It's got to perform precisely with the interaction between the various controls, just like the original consoles. So the SSL plugins are pretty fantastic, and that comes from people who even design their own plugins. The UF8 is an amazing piece that feels great and works great. And so those have been very successful, and I was very happy to come back to SSL and launch those successfully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as somebody using them, what struck me about it was the very first iteration of it. The plugins. Duante, I think it was, or something was the name.
Duende
And
was the first one.
Duende, Duende,
Yeah.
that's right. And I was like, holy shit, these sound really good, you know? And so I got into it at that point. And now the recent iterations, the SSL Channel Strip 2, I think it is, with the UC1, it's like the combination of it sounding excellent, just being a really good sonically as a plugin, to the way that, the usability of the controls. And to your point, you helped make a, an interface tool that's just a box. I mean, as people like to joke around, it's a fancy mouse, when we describe things that help the computer out, whether that's, a Digidesign mixer or a UC1, whatever we're talking about, those are what they're doing. They're just controlling, but the feel of it, like everything about it feels rock solid. It feels like it's really solid and built well, built like a tank, but not in a way that makes you feel like, oh, this is gonna, put a dent in my desk or something like that. It just sort of sits really nice.
There's a whole thing about, not mousing around and from a creative, again, ergonomics, the man-machine interface. When you can, I tell people on the UC1, the channel strip controller, you could turn the monitor off and you just dial, you can see the name of the track and you just dial it up and then you start interacting with controls. It's if you're on a console. And this is a $700-800 device that you literally can operate it like a console. It's got all the EQ and all the dynamic settings right there and bus compressors and everything you need, and you don't have to do it with the mouse. You can do it as if you're on a console, and that's great.
Yeah,
And then having the tactile faders and the channel strip controller and the master controller, it's like consoles were, uh, there's similarities between consoles. They all have a mic pre, they all have EQ, they all, some of them have dynamics, but uh, it's the way that they're organized and having, an SSL it had transport controller, it had track arming, it had the ability to control the machine very productively and it flowed. It's as if you were on the remote for the machine. In the old days, we had tape machine remotes, but SSL
yeah,
brought that into the console where you could track arm and control the transport. And it's not just plugging it in. There were a number of parameters that had to make the machine work the way it would work with its own remote, where when you rewound, it rewound a certain part. When you hit stop, it didn't bounce. So SSL optimize that. And I think the ability to control Pro Tools very similarly today, you have to get that right. And SSL fortunately does. Those controllers operate in a certain fashion that allow you to do things creatively. And if you didn't have it, you're operating in a completely different environment. So they've been very productive, and I've helped a lot of people out. I wanted to get all my friends into it, and fortunately, those who have are really happy with them.
yeah.
It's been
I've loved it.
wildly popular.
It's just been a game changer for me about making
Yeah.
records because when I got into this in the 90s, went to school, it was like, studios were places where you got up out of your chair and you ran around the room and did all these things. And then the industry and the direction everything went, I say it became a thing where we just sit with our elbows at our sides going click, 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 and looking at a screen. And I feel like that's not what I signed up for. And so when this came along, it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can move again, I can breathe and I can
Well,
actually, grab a knob and just listen with my ears.
I think, well, that's the key. I think you can create music, you can create audio, you can create records any way you want. I would encourage people to want to do it differently and understand that the investment, whether that's going to a studio for tracks, whether that's getting enhanced controller capacity, will enhance your creativity in ways that you won't know unless you try it. So I would say getting back to any improved quality, whether it's better mic preamps or controllers or actually working in a studio and doing things that get back to, there's certainly a difference in the sound. There was a Jimmy Iovine article that I read just last night where he talked about getting back to quality and the differences in the way that records were made back in the day and the way they're made today. And I think that there's a lot of the sounds that are generic and gone for quantity where the records we used to make were more quality oriented. And I know that the economics don't necessarily support that. People used to spend 4 months to a year making a record. Uh, where now they're lucky if they get 4 weeks, I guess. But
Right.
wherever you have a choice, if you can, I think my wisdom and encouragement would be to do it, spend more time getting the quality going in any way possible and really focus on the differences. When I listen to the
Yeah.
records, I know that people really toiled on some of these classic records that stand the test of time. And I think that we ought to be making records that have the capacity to stand the test of time. At least, if not every day, sometimes, once in a while.
Yeah. Well, shall we talk about that a little bit more? I mean, do we go back to Soundworks now and just talk about your experience working with people and watching them go through the process? I mean, working with some people like Steely Dan, Shaka Khan, those are incredible. And we have a playlist, Rock Stars. It's actually a title playlist that Phil put together. It's called Phil Wagner's Amazing Tracks, and it's just full of like unbelievable stuff in here. So I wondered if you wanted to explain what that is for us to listen to. And I mean, it's so many hit records,
Sure. First, I
you
want to
know.
decipher a myth that's been carrying on to this day when people say, oh, what does it matter anyway because it's MP3s? Well, wake up. It's not MP3s anymore. We've just got Spotify, who is the the most popular streaming format and long awaited, have gone to 24-bit 44.1, which is better than CD quality, not quite high resolution audio, which is 48K. And I worked with the Recording Academy to develop the high resolution audio standards because I knew that we would get there. And so when Apple went for high res, been a Tidal fan, they went from CD quality to FLAC now. And the point is that all major streaming services are now on FLAC. So we don't have the same excuse that we had for many years. What does it matter anyway? It does matter, and people will be able to hear the difference. And we're making records that are, if you want to make a record that's timeless and you want it to stand out, I would say let's take advantage of things like 96K, for example, or know that we're mixing for 24-bit and take advantage of that dynamic range. So yeah, in the old days, we would toil. I remember I was doing a demo for the Hit Factory, and we had the Rolling Stones guys came by, and they loved leakage. Okay, great. Well, Steely Dan liked everything being dry. But there's differences in methods of recording, and we would really take a lot of time to uh, uh, focus on getting every last buzz and quality, out of the record. And I think that time, we had more time, but still, I think, once you lock it in, like, I mixed something last year and I knew that I was going to go work mixing it on Origin. And the difference is when I listen to the mixes that are not done in an analog recording console, it's like a piece of paper, flat, two-dimensional, compared to something that lives and breathes and has a space and dynamics that you get that way. And if I can
Mhm.
impart one thing to the people listening to this, that there is a difference, which you won't experience unless you try to hear it. And if you get into a studio and you put up the faders, and instantly you'll notice something. And then when you put it in the can, you listen to it later, you'll hear that difference. And I could play you this mix, but the fact is that it is very striking. And if you know that it exists, maybe you'll aspire to doing it that way, because there is a difference, and people ought to experience that. It's too easy to just make it in Pro Tools and do everything in the box, but getting out and letting the electrons spread across a recording console has a whole different vibe to it.
Hey, rock stars. Writing and recording your next great song just got a whole lot easier with Complete 15 from Native Instruments. This powerful toolkit gives you everything from deep sound design to instant musical ideas. Contact 8 introduces creative features like the new Chords tool, letting you generate and customize compelling chord progressions without needing to know music theory, making it perfect for songwriting. And the Phrases tool helps you find fresh melodic lines on the spot. With over 165 instruments and more than 150,000 sounds, Massive X battery and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, you've got everything you need to create in any genre. You can shape your ideas into real music fast. Whether you're sketching an idea or finishing a full production, Complete 15 keeps you in the creative flow from first note to final mix. Add your Complete Control keyboard or machine hardware to the mix for seamless integration and hands-on control. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Yeah, well, and maybe there's absolutely room for that kind of making music in the box, but maybe we think about that in terms of a step in the process, like maybe we're composing there or we're like getting our ideas sorted out. And then when we think about the studio, we're also thinking about an opportunity to like stretch, and like fill a room full of musicians and really capture sounds and use the console in those capacities too.
Sure. And listening to that playlist, if it gets published, it's about 100 tracks that I use for speaker tests. And these are some of the finest recordings that I've ever heard, many of which I was involved with, not as an engineer, some I was, but mostly in serving the studios that were making them. And it's really put together because they are timeless. They are amazingly well done. And when you say, could I ever make a record like that? And yes, you could, if you have the budget, of course. But the fact is, they're pretty amazing, and they're a testament to how great it can be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at like "Don't Stop Till You Get It," Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, Frankie Goes to Hollywood was in there.
Yeah,
Madonna, and I mean, it's just record after record, and these are all things that were. But what do they represent for you? Do they represent records made on a particular console, or just records made with real care? Like you
I think
said,
more
this is
the real
your
care
reference. Yeah.
I mean, Vogue was mixed at Soundworks by Shep Pettibone, and it's an amazing track. I listened to some of the Ed Cherney stuff on which is Grammy Award-winning records with Bonnie Raitt, and they raise the hair in the back of your head. They're just so spectacular. And I used to talk to Eddie Cherney, a dear friend of mine, all the time. May rest in peace. And he just said there was magic in the room, and all the things that I've learned and I've seen. It's not about forcing a recording. It's about having the time to let it happen. And everything I've gleaned from some of the best producers that I've experienced and talked to and read about is that they just got in the room and would have the time. Sometimes nothing would happen in a day. That was a frustration for me in the studio. But if you just let it happen and get enough musicians in a room and have enough time and enough meals and occasionally, a drink or whatever, that eventually that magic will happen. And that's when you listen to these records, what the common thing that I think is that you have to have the time and the environment for the magic to happen. And that I don't think is really as much a thing these days. Now, looking at Nashville, I look at what has been done with the tracking room and Keith Urban resurrecting that. It's amazing. And I see what Dan Orbach is doing, building an amazing studio. And artists who get this recognize that they need to have that creative environment where you can have a bunch of musicians in a room and have the time and spend the time and know that if you give it enough time and there's enough talent in the room, the magic will happen. And it's not going to be, it may be in the first take, it may not be till the 40th take, but we have that luxury where we can make those takes. But I think it's about having the time and the environment and the creative passion to say, we're going to go for magic.
Yeah. Do you feel like you got to witness a lot of people go in with that attitude saying, we don't know how we're going to get this done, but we just know we're going to get this done?
I did light tracking, haven't done that much tracking. Most of my career has been focused on mixing, but when I listen to some of my favorite records and I talk to the people who made them, I know that, it was really about having the time. And sometimes you're going to start over. I listened to, if you look, reading about with Bruce Swedien in Thriller, he said, we had to listen to the difference between 16-track 2-inch and 24-track 2-inch for tracks. Now, again, these are decisions that people actively had to have the time and patience to say we're going to make. So we're not making that decision anymore, but it could be the differences between an 8-channel mic preamp. It could be the differences between cable. When I was involved with Madonna's second record, and I put a studio together for Steve Bray, and his engineer came in It's really Freddie Demand's engineer, Madonna's manager. And he said, we're going to rewire the whole room from the standard cabling. I want you to listen to this Canary Star Quad cabling. And I said, but Madonna's coming in tomorrow. He said, well, we're going to rewire. I want you to rewire it all. We listened to it. Steve Bray had 48 keyboard tracks on a sequencer. Push play, it all came out. And we listened to, like, what does a DX7 really sound like? But with a different cable, it sounded, in every way you could hear it, low frequency, mid-range, and high frequency, sounded better. So I, over the weekend, rewired 48 keyboards with Canary, and you listen to Madonna's second record, True Blue, and you can hear it. And then Steve went up to Michael Hutchinson, mixed one and at Sigma, and Michael Verdict did the rest of them at Hit Factory, and like Papa Don't Preach, and you listen to some of these songs in that record, and it's just spectacular. But you got to start with the tracks. Everyone says, "Oh, fix it in the mix," but if you start with great tracks, you're going to have a lot more to work with. So
Yeah.
I think people need to do that, really.
Yeah, get it right at the source, that idea
Yeah,
too. And then, of course,
work harder to make those decisions earlier on.
Absolutely, yeah. Those are hard decisions to make later, and they do, like, to your point, they do take some time. So when you're talking about rewiring, you're talking about rewiring the tracking setup, or it's like, oh, the studio was many keyboards.
Literally, every keyboard which was wired with the basic standard New York studio cabling, we had a LA Golden Ears come in, another attraction for me to go to LA, and listen to a cable on a synthesizer and say it sounds better. Okay, I'll have Madonna wait 3 days. You rewire the entire 48 channels of keyboards with Canary Star Quad because it sounds better.
Yeah.
So it's not this sort of wham bam thinking, man, we'll fix it, we'll make it sound. It's getting the sauce right. And when we listen to, like, Wolfgang Puck, who's famous for Spago Restaurant, and he says, get the right ingredients and you'll have a better meal.
Yeah, indeed. It's good. And that starts by, carefully selecting your produce and, whatever you're getting at the store.
Exactly. So think of things like, people, oh, cable, what does it matter? Well, that's a mindset. And this is what I got from the Steely Dan folks. Have the mindset to make the improvements in any way that you can, whether it could be a cable, it could be anything, but it's get that right up front. And that's the real qualitative difference, I think, from the records that were made back in the day. And when you went into a studio, I thought about this recently, you were getting the benefit of months and years of improvements that the technical staff at the studio would make to make it better. So when you came in, you capture that recording that way. And I don't know that enough of the, hundreds of people I've dealt with in private environments, they get it working, and I don't know that they really revisit making it better. And that better might be getting your monitoring environment better, whether it's better speakers. If you can't hear it, you don't know it's there, or getting your room alignment. So many records I hear that maybe the bass isn't right because their room isn't aligned right. And I think that we need to pay much more attention to room alignment so you don't have room anomalies that are causing you to not hear your mix in the way that you could. And this is what we did in recording studios. We would retune the room, we'd fix the room consistently. So just because you get it set up, it has sound, doesn't mean that it's as good as it could be. Now, I know the economics are harder, but if you're going for the gusto and you want to have the best environment you can, you need to revisit things like cabling, power, signal path, room alignment, making sure that you bring someone in who knows what they're doing, not just room correction software, but that can hear things and you communicate with them. Been working with Sam Burkow recently, and he's an amazing person to help you define a room. And people work with proper designers sometimes and still needs to be tuned over time. And sometimes they don't, and they just get what they get. But I think it's important to address no detail is too small, is my motto.
Right. And then do you think that extends in? So you're sort of referring to the control room and the reproduction through the speakers and the way it interacts with the room. Have you learned that also applies in a big way to the tracking spaces, and like, you can't even, because you won't be able to capture the right quality of the instrument if those rooms aren't tuned as well? Hey rock stars, when it's time to finish your music, iZotope Ozone 12 gives you the powerful new tools to master with confidence. The new bass control helps you balance your low-end EQ, sustain, and punch so that your tracks translate everywhere. Unlimiter restores clarity and impact to overcompressed mixes, and Stem EQ lets you rebalance vocals, drums, and bass using only the stereo mix file. When it's time to push loudness, Ozone's new IRC5 Maximizer delivers clean and powerful competitive masters that stay open and musical. And with an updated mastering assistant that guides, not decides, you can move faster, make better decisions, and stay fully in control from start to finish. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off.
Yeah, I'll give you a thing. I put a subwoofer in a car I had, and I was listening to Bob Marley Legends, and in I think it was One Love, there was someone had kicked a mic stand, and you didn't. It went through mastering, you didn't hear it, and when people started to put subwoofers that go down to 20 hertz, it came through, and I thought someone hit my card, and the next day I heard the same sound. My point is that you have to be able to hear all the way down to 20 hertz. Maybe
Right.
you won't get it flat to maybe 25 or 28, but you have to be able to have proper monitoring in your environment to be able to catch everything in tracking, to be able to understand what's happening and the full bandwidth of sounds. And smaller rooms have a lot of cancellation in high frequencies and maybe don't develop a wave down that far. But you have to go for the gusto. You have to really try to get a wide range monitoring and bass traps and things like that.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the larger control rooms. Real World, you worked with Peter Gabriel for a long time. Maybe tell
Yes.
us a little bit about what was it like working with him? What's he like, and what's Real World like? Because that's a very big control room, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Peter's great, and he bought SSL because it was available, and he had a love for the company. And his room at Real World, which was designed by Neil Grant, a friend of mine, and who had also done Hit Factory and a bunch of other studios around the world, made this amazing place in Bath, England, that had the ability for everyone to record in a large room with big windows, and the room was probably 60 by 60 squared, and that's the studio and control room. And it's an amazing place, and Peter's done a lot of work there, and that's one of 3 or 4. He's got writing studios. He's got another studio that has a drum booth, if you will, up on a open metal platform that radiates into the entire room. It's not a booth, but Peter's very avant-garde, and everything he does, and his creative space is pretty amazing. I've been there a number of times.
So at Real World in the control room, the drums would just be in the control room too?
Yeah, the control room's huge. It's a tracking studio, and then you have the console in the middle of the tracking room, which serves as the control room.
Wow. Okay, cool. One of the things that, we had lots of things we could talk about, but one of the things that I thought would be fun to mention, particularly as you talk about things like the direction of audio, you're talking about how you need to, I think a word you didn't use, but this popped into my mind, which is the idea of future-proofing what you create. That
Yes.
concept that you brought up of people saying, well, what does it matter? It's going down to an MP3 anyway. And an equivalent would be back in the day saying, what does it matter? It's going down to a TV speaker or something like that. And those might all be relevant in terms of you might want your record to sound good in many, many places, but that doesn't mean don't have it sound good in the greatest listening environment. And so, even in video, I've made videos for YouTube back in the day where we didn't have a high resolution camera. And now I want to watch those, but they just look like, they don't look like what video looks like today. So to your point, making sure that we are working with audio quality in the digital space, probably particularly because that's where a lot of changes happen. And make sure that it's great. I know you've been very involved in the high resolution streaming and then also Dante in the studio. And I wondered if you would give us an introduction to some of that.
Sure. I think it all ties together. I think it's not just, and I tell the schools that I talk to, it's not just about Pro Tools. It is, that's a very important part, but getting people to understand advanced concepts of high resolution, of surround sound, and which is now, is beyond 5.1. It's 714 and even 914. Dante as technology basis. So maybe you say, well, this guitar doesn't sound as good in my room here. Well, what about outside? I have this great picture in my mind of a shot of Eddie Kramer that Eddie Kramer took of Robert Plant and Jimmy Page outside dancing to Dancing Days, and Jimmy actually recording certain tracks at his house outside. And today, you can run a mic cable out there, but Dante interfaces allow you to run hundreds of feet on a single piece of Ethernet cable, and sound amazing. The Focusrite preamps that they make in their Dante devices are descendants of the ISA. So there's a number of different Dante devices that you can get that are semi-affordable, that allow you to move audio, just anywhere in your house or anywhere in your recording environment on a piece of Ethernet cable. And I still think here, 10, 12 years on, people have a hard time getting their head around the fact that you get 96 channels at 96K uncompressed on a single piece of Ethernet cable. The technology
Wow.
and the switches, the Cisco switches that allow that, were based on billions of dollars of investment in the IT industry, mostly fueled by banks, that allow that technology to operate robustly, and a standard off-the-shelf several $100 switch that allows you to pump that high data rate across long distances. So it can cross switches. And if you look at NFL Network, a project that I was involved with SSL, they had, 20,000 signals floating throughout their facility in Dante. And people can take advantage of that and allow their quality to improve by moving their audio out of their small space that they may have into another part. They might have a great living room. They might have a part of the back, a barn, and you just run cable from one place to another. And a lot of people have done this, and I think a lot of people could still do this more.
Let's stay on that idea, because I think it's one of the descriptions of what's possible that gets overlooked sometimes, because even you dove into some of the tech of NFL and switching and things like that, and then we sometimes are left with this feeling, oh, Dante is some kind of computer codey thing. I don't even know what it is, so I don't know how to use my imagination and start thinking outside the box. Let's just say somebody's got a home. I mean, I've got a house. I've got across the yard, I've got a studio. Somebody maybe moves into a new home, and a lot of times new homes are pre-wired for, there's no more phone lines going around, but there's a power, and there may be an Ethernet jack in each room or something like that. I don't know if they're still wiring houses that way. But you can find yourself in a building where there's, it's very easy to run Ethernet and just have a jack on the wall in every space of a building or a house. And so now all of a sudden, you start with your small room for your home studio, and maybe you set up your speakers in there. But with this setup, how would you take advantage of all these spaces? And even, how far can you run it? Can you have your neighbor's house 10 houses down the street from you integrated into your studio setup somehow? How do we think about this?
That's harder, but I think for starters, if you think about the base creative process, you get down operating your workstation and you got your mics, and that's straight ahead. The one thing about Dante, you do have to introduce a level of control panel. Once you set it up, it works. Sometimes you have to reboot your switch. So that in and of itself is one more thing that you have to think about. But once you get the routing down, you can unplug the interface, plug it back in, and it will find itself on the network. It's network-based audio. It's full bandwidth, uncompressed. And it's certainly a lot easier to run a single Ethernet cable in an older house than multi-core cable. And in a newer house, it's not impossible to have any competent electrician snake Cat6 Ethernet cable through your walls and put it on a panel. And once you have it configured, you literally, anywhere you plug that interface. So you might say, well, let's try to record this in a bedroom, let's try to record in the living room, let's try to record it in the bathroom. Anywhere you can plug that cable in through your switch. And the key is that the audio can live within a mixed-use network where you could have all the other things going on in your house. The key is that you do have the ability to mix your signals in a gigabit switch environment with Cat6 gigabit cable that allows these Dante interfaces to operate. And again, not all converters are the same within the Dante environment. So just because you hear one that you didn't like doesn't mean there's not another one that sounds better. And once you decide that that's the way you want to work, because you want to have an ensemble in your living room, then you just have to get the Ethernet there, and you control it from your laptop. Once you set it, you can forget it. You can adjust your mic preamps remotely, and something as simple as getting the mic preamp closer to the instrument eliminates a lot of other problems of RF and EMI.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. May I interject a question?
Yeah.
So I want to help with the concept here. So we have our control room where the studio is, and we've got our computer and our interface and our speakers, and that's where we're typically sitting. And we imagine, well, I have to plug a mic into the back of this interface that I've got or into the preamp and then into the interface to get it into my studio. But with this concept that you're talking about, you literally say, well, I've got this other box with me, and I'm just going to throw it under my arm. I carry it around. I carry it to the den or something like that. And now I set that box down. And what is that box? Let's just in our imagination, it's just a bunch of XLR jacks, and you plug the mics right in, and an Ethernet comes out the back. Does it also have a headphone jack on it where the headphone feed is going back to the musicians through this same box and same
Sure.
cable? How do we think about that flow?
Yeah, if you have a Focusrite, the red line of Focusrite interfaces, the red net is specific where it's got analog I/O in and out, doesn't have a headphone jack. But the red line has multiple microphone preamps, multiple outputs, headphone outputs, and you can have that where you're recording, where people can plug their headphones in, and you have a control panel that will set their headphone levels and sources, and then you have A to D, D to A's in that box, and out of the box just comes the Ethernet cable, and that sits on the network and is controlled remotely. So you can remotely control the gain of those devices on your desktop, but
from the control room, you mean?
From the control room, yeah, and but the actual electronics that you're controlling are out in the studio. So just getting
but the
that
headphones
closer.
still send to the musicians, and they've got they can hear overdub or do whatever.
Yeah, there's multiple boxes.
That's pretty wild.
It is, and it works. It works pretty flawlessly.
So I hadn't considered that, but I imagine. So here's something I imagine. You've got your home studio control room, and then another room has a drum set in it, and you've got a box in there that has headphones that go to the drummer, and all the mics go into this box. And then you've got another box that you can carry to the living room or, have a couple parked in different spaces. And obviously it's wonderful to be in a studio setting with line of sight where we're all looking at each other, but in home environments, sometimes you're just like, well, it's, we just have to record from this room to that room, and we'll have everybody and everybody can hear each other. And does it allow you to sort of send video as well, or is that not necessarily on the same network?
There is Dante video for monitoring that it can sit inside the same Ethernet switch. There's Bolin cameras that are Dante, Bolin, I believe, and or AN, and then that can sit on the switch and give you remote monitoring capacity, so you can actually see the musicians in the other room. And then the audio
Wow.
and the video sit on the same network fabric, and it's all there. And you can have it in multiple rooms simultaneously. The actual latency of the network is as low as 1 millisecond, and it's certainly better than FireWire. Excuse me, dating myself. Than the best USB latency, and approximates what we get on USB interfaces these days. But it is
That's really
professional,
amazing.
yeah, professional low latency environments.
So like, just a simple little TV screen, parked in the room and one of these boxes, and you've got everybody looking at each other on a session
Sure, exactly.
and headphone mixes and high quality audio. And, it depends on, like, to your point, you still want to pick the box that has the best preamp in it, or you want to have your own, lunchbox full of great preamps, or what would be the SSL preamp box that we would consider if we were doing that too?
The SSL Dante interfaces, now they just came out with, I believe it's a 16 by 8 box or 12 by 8 box, and it's more affordable. It runs on Dante, so you'd use the 8 outputs for your line outputs to feed a headphone mixing environment, or you could use any of the Dante-based headphone environments from Allen Heath or others. But there's a new interface that's more affordable now that has mic pre, line in, and line out, which is a first, because the ones that SSL did have were sort of industrial grade for the live and broadcast consoles. So they just first now come out with a Dante interface that is lower priced.
That's really cool. It's exciting and it's a lot of fun. Well, thanks for giving us some of that. And then what else did you want to say about high resolution and lossless and streaming and stuff like that? Do we need to just sort of expand our imagination of where this will end up when it gets there?
I think we need to now understand that, we're beyond 16-bit 44.1. We're into the ability to stream full 24-bit 44.1 minimum, and in the cases of Tidal and Apple and other streaming services, the ability to go up to even 192K. Amazon gives you the moniker directly, Ultra HD. I have all the streaming services because I test them. But you have high resolution availability on most streaming services and FLAC on all streaming services that are popular these days, and it's really strong, and it does make a difference even on Apple your AirPod Pros, even though you're not decoding it in high resolution. I find that the better resolution streaming services are even noticeable on AirPod Pros. So that's another, what does it matter because everyone's listening on earbuds? Does matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I
People
did
should
a
be.
test once where I've talked about this before, and I don't know if it's really an apples to apples test to what you're talking about, but I think it's sort of in the same idea. I had somebody bring in a 4-track tape. In fact, it was the same 4-track machine that I think uh, um, that the boss used to record Nebraska or something like that. And it was, I mean, not the exact same one, but the same model. And so we just wanted to transfer that into Pro Tools, and I thought, well, here's a chance to see what version of, this Pro Tools session I should do. So I did the 1641, the 2441, 48K, I did 96K, 32, and I transferred the exact same tape in 4 different ways and then immediately bounced it out without doing anything maybe other than the same pans on everything. So essentially there was no processing other than just capture and export. And I exported them all as the exact same MP3. And then I just listened to the MP3s. And to your point, sure enough, the one that had the highest capture sample rate, the MP3 sounded way better, you know?
Well, the point is we're not dealing with MP3s anymore, but you're right, and I've heard that myself. So I think capture makes a huge difference. And play with stuff and listen to it for yourself. But we're in an environment now where FLAC files, which are lossless, are there for everybody to hear. And I always think we're not making music for today, we're making music for tomorrow. If you want your music to be timeless, make it so it can stand the test of time, because quality is just going to get better and better on the delivery side. And Apple made an effort from 10 years ago with their Made for iTunes, where they were allowing people to upload their tracks in 96K, 24-bit. So when they did make the switch, most of it was there already. Now the same can be applied to Atmos, where they're paying 10% greater royalties for submitted tracks, even though they're not the Atmos track might not be played by the user. If you submit your files with Atmos, you have a greater royalty rate. So the commitment to having 75% of the entire catalog, and tens of millions of tracks to be able to play back in Atmos is there. And I think it's a tool like any other, and I would encourage everyone to really pay attention to creating their mixes with Atmos in mind, if not doing it directly
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, we get a chance to talk about that a lot on the show, and I'm excited about it. And I haven't dabbled in mixing Atmos myself, but I'm now as a producer, I'm turning it over to Matt Boudreau, and he's been doing Atmos mixes for me, and it's just so fun to hear those in an Atmos studio too.
Well, I'll tell you, Tom Holman, who invented 5.1, he was a big player at Skywalker and invented THX audio, but he's the TH in THX. And Tom said when 5.1 first came out that it's not as much about the quality of the speaker as the identical timbre from speaker to speaker. So roll the clock forward to 2025, you have IK Multimedia, who has an $8,000 package of 7.1.4 that you can deploy on stands. So it's more affordable than you think. And they're lower quality speakers, but they're identical timbre. And that combination works. So if you want to audition your stuff and start to create Atmos in a affordable way, there's ways to do it these days that don't require you to spend $30,000 or $40,000 on an Atmos rig.
Yeah, that's good. That's cool. And I mean, I even heard Andrew Shep saying, even if you put together an Atmos rig and all your speakers were, Avantone single cones, you can still do it,
Right.
And it's to your point, it's that quality of making sure that you're at least getting consistency of tone and frequency response and all that, so that you can make decisions. All right. So to your point about future proofing and making records that have a timeless quality, I'm going to take you back for a last question here and go back in time a little bit. And we're going to talk about another song you sent us to listen to, which is Daydream Time Machine. Tell us about that. What does that project mean to you, and what, what is the story behind it?
Sure. So on the last point on the quality of the Apple, they're pushing the decoding into the headphones themselves. So the latest version of the Apple Studio or Max headphones have the FLAC decoding, and I believe the latest version of the AirPod Pro will have that as well, surprisingly.
Wow. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode.
Yeah, so Daydream Time Machine is my goddaughter's boyfriend's band, and I heard the mixes, and I was like, don't let people materials. So I said, next time you go in the studio, I'll mix it for you. So I went into, Chris Lord-Alge has a Origin room that Mark DeSisto operates, and he ran Pro Tools, and I did the mixing, and we went in and I just, mixed like a lot of tracks in 2 days, and the one that they had released was this, uh, um, one that's out there, and,
What a mess we made.
yeah, what a mess we made, and it's great. It's a nice track that they had recorded, and again, we brought it up through Origin, and I'm very pleased with the results, and it's something that just, has sensibilities about everything that I've ever heard, and it's great to get back into doing a little mixing. They have more tracks we're gonna remix and release, but they're a cool little band out of Southern California that are quality enough that I was happy to get involved with, and I'm thrilled with the way it worked out.
That's great, man. That's a lot of fun. And so you once again you brought up the origin, and I don't think you got a chance to tell us what is the origin. If you want to give us a brief
Sure.
introduction to that.
Origin is either a 16 inline or 32 channel inline console that is the most affordable SSL of large format ever made, and SSL have produced hundreds and hundreds of them in a very short period of time because it harkens back to the way that the 4000 was organized. It has a E&G series equalizer, and it has a mic preamp that's spectacular, and um, and a full layout. It's, the accoutrements within an SSL console are fairly significant and beyond what any other console provides. So all your headphone mixes, all your main outputs, all your ability to manage a session from the center section point of view are built in there. It fits a UF8 inside the center section, uh, and it has, again, the essence of a great SSL console that's ever been made inside of a package that's, in the $50,000 to $60,000 range or $40,000 range for a 16. That's a lot of money for a lot of people, but the quality for those who have it, who said, "I want a real console," you need to add a patch bay, you need to add some furniture, but it's a real console that sounds a certain way, that operates a certain way, that when you turn the knobs in the EQ, you hear something that is immediate and effective in a way that I couldn't. I'm not a Pro Tools operator, so it's not for me. But when you are able to do it on the console, we made a point of using as few plugins as possible. I think when you hear the track, you'll start to hear that stuff. And I know that the dimensionality of it is unbeatable. And that's the key. You get something that really produces a result. And if you're after that result, it's a big studio product for small studios. Completely
I think I
self-contained, plugs
remember
into a wall.
SSL coming. Oh, so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. You plug it in the wall and it works. You have to connect it, of course, but it's as good as SSL knows how to make, and I used to say friends don't let friends buy used consoles because there's a lot of work. We talked about John Edwards. We had to put tens of thousands of dollars into an old console, and that's not for everybody. So you can go and buy something new and set it up in a newer room, and it's going to be spectacular. You can have all that incredible quality that anyone's ever wanted in an inline console design. The Origin has 88 faders on mix. It's great.
Yeah. I was just going to make a comment based on when you were talking about the dimensionality. I think I remember SSL coming and doing a presentation in Nashville. Maybe we were at Studio um, A or something like that at RCA, Javelina when it was the big room there. And I think it was a demo of the SSL early AWS or something, and a mix. It was just the same mix off a laptop that was played through Pro Tools, and we heard it on the speakers. And then it was broken out and it was matched level to level and panning and everything through the console. And it was pointed out how it added an extra octave to the bass, of the whole sound of the thing. It literally expanded the sound in a way
Well,
that didn't exist before.
that's a 6 foot deeper. And I think when you listen to
Yeah.
tracks that you say, how did they get that? It's about dimensionality and having the technology that supports dimensionality. And I'm just, we used to say the size of the sound is directly proportional to the size of the box that you use. And maybe it's not as true as it once was, but it is true when you look at getting out of the box and into a console that lives and breathes and has dynamics and dimensionality in a way that is unique. And when you hear it, you'll hear it. So know that there's,
Yeah.
ways to go beyond, and that investment can prove very fruitful. If you're looking for that dimensionality, you can find it.
That's pretty cool. For me, that was the Bonnaroo experience, the hay bale over those years,
Bingo. Exactly.
was doing recording after recording and not even going multi-track to a tape machine or a Pro Tools system and then back into a console, because even that's a filter. But just taking those mics and going straight to a console and mixing it right down to a 2-track. And I was just blown away. I mean, it was like, you needed to do less. You needed to make less EQ adjustments sometimes. Sometimes it was perfect to make an EQ adjustment, but you just didn't have as much stuff to fix. You just sort of balanced the sound, and all of a sudden it came through transparently, and it was just a really eye-opening. And then when we had the SSL AWS series in there for a few years, it was just a holy shit moment.
I think
really
we need
cool.
to be careful not to overuse plugins, and a lot of people use compressors and overuse compressors. And when you go back to Bruce Swedien and Michael Jackson, and this is a person who would ride faders, who would not fall back to compressors, and compressors even in a console can be overused. And people need to get back to this level of dynamic performance. And with a 24-bit environment where you have the ability, if you're not trying to, be louder than the next guy, you just want to be better, then you use dynamic range and dimensionality, the ability to fine panning adjustments, just off center to get the level dimensionality. And you can do a lot with pan pots, but the key is that if you're going for something that is better, you'll get there if you work hard enough to get there.
That's great. Well, Phil, I really enjoyed getting a chance to finally talk to you at length. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Can you?
Thank you.
I have one more closing question that I like to ask all of our guests on the show, and it's hypothetical, but we get to take the Wayback Studio machine. So you get to go back in time, find young Phil, and you're like, and you maybe you're saying, hey, listen, kid, if you stop practicing that trumpet, you're going to lose your embouchure. So you might want to think about it. I don't know. But you go back and find your young self. Maybe it's when you're, making sure that you don't run out of, that you pick the right length of carbon before you fired up the lights, because you don't want it to run out in the middle of the show. But you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing that you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice do you feel like you'd like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I think be one step ahead. Like you mentioned with the carbon arc, that thing's going to burn out unless you pay attention to it. You always have to think about what's going to happen next. And this is, the best management training I've ever had. Think 3 steps ahead. What's it going to feel like when the musicians get in a room? What's going to be like when I'm doing a tracking session or mixing? How do I keep everyone happy? And if you pride yourself on servicing your client, which I always have, then you're going to have to think 3 steps ahead. How can I make this better for the experience? How can I ensure that everyone has a great time and a great experience? And how can I be better that I'm going to anticipate, just like I had to anticipate a punch with tape, anticipate the punch and whatever process you're involved with, and think about, even what does this sound like when it leaves my room? What are people going to experience when this track is out? And I think 3 steps ahead is the key. Be ready. The Boy Scouts honor, always be prepared. And particularly with artists and producers, be ready anticipate their needs. And that could be something like their favorite soda. This book I just read on the Record Plant, Buzz Me In, which is phenomenal. And their approach was to, artists are on tour, they're in great hotels, they're getting great service and support. It's one thing to say we're about audio, but have everyone's favorite headphones, have their favorite drinks, have their favorite food. Be ready with that. Get them into an environment where they're at maximum creative potential. And that's sometimes going above and beyond and not spending an hour looking through menus. Know what everyone wants before they get there and have it.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really, really good advice. I didn't even get to ask you about those records on the wall behind you. Anything you want to give a shout out to before we bid you adieu?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. These are, that's the Chaka Khan record that I worked on. And the rest of them are divas that I was involved with SSL. We have Alicia Keys and Shania Twain and Mariah Carey and Madonna. Got Dr. Dre on top there.
Amazing.
Dre realizes that SSL is his love and his tool, and Jimmy Iovine was just really crediting him as being a prolific producer, and he, really tie his success to the power of an SSL console. And all those
Yeah.
other artists, Jack Joseph Puig once said that there's a certain unique functionality within the mid-range performance of an SSL equalizer that allows the lead vocal to float above the mix in a way that no other piece of gear that he's ever used, and he used every single one, allowed to have happen. Now imagine for a second that that's true, and this is what people use it say. That ability to have the lead vocal float above the mix. This interface I'm using, the SSL2 Plus, has a 4K button. That's legacy sound quality that allows the guitar or the lead vocal to float a little bit above the mix in a way that's unique. That special sauce that's within SSL circuitry that's made, billions of hit records. That still exists in everything that SSL does. And I would encourage everyone to ponder that for a moment. And if it's true, try to experience it for yourself and see how that works.
That's so cool.
It is
man.
true.
I love it, dude. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for joining us on the show. It's been an absolute honor to be able to talk with you. Please let the rock stars know how can they find out more about you? Where should they go? Follow you, see what you're up to, or connect with you, or what if they just have questions?
Sure. I think you can Google me, see a bit about what I've done. You can email me, I guess, philwagner9k@gmail.com. I'll try to help you if I can. And wish everyone the best of luck in their endeavors and say, stick to quality. Strive for quality.
I love it, dude. Rockstars, thank you so much for hanging with us and watching or listening. If you're listening, remember we're on YouTube and there's amazing video to come check out and see pictures of things we're sharing and just see Phil's smiling face as he's all the gold records on the back wall there. And then, hit that like button and subscribe. And so you get more of this awesome content from the podcast here on our channel. And then also drop in a comment and let us know your thoughts. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Do you have more questions? Maybe you'd like to know a lot more about some of those particular sessions that Phil has been involved in, and I'll be sure to jump in and answer those questions. And then if Phil needs to know about one, I'll make sure Phil.
Thank you all, and I hope you got something out of this. I'm happy to have had the session. Thank you very much, Lidge, for your support. Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for your support, man. Cheers, and great to see you. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who make this episode possible. Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, Grace Design, and Picker. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase at isotope.com or nativeinstruments.com. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes below. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because it's a great way to help support this show. And I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Daria Tupesis, and Max Young. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.